extreme pleasure to be participating with you today. I am here to talk about implicit bias, unconscious bias, what it is, what we can do about it. If you are watching from Facebook or YouTube, and I have a couple of documents that I'm going to share. If you would like to get those documents after the fact, let me know. Give some money to extra give to the YWCA, and we'll make it happen for you. So welcome. A little bit. I'm just going to get started right away, and what I am going to do is share my screen. Can you all see this? Everybody see this? Good. Thank you. And hi, Cheryl. Welcome everybody. This is a conversation really about implicit bias, unconscious bias. And implicit bias and unconscious bias are really the same things. We're just going to talk about what the implications are. And not just from a racial standpoint, but from a business person, leader, going through life as a parent kind of a thing. And to sort of set the tone, I thought I would start with a quote by Phil Slater, who was a writer, and said, "Man or women are unique among the animals in their practiced ability to know things that are not so." It absolutely is true. And so I hope that when we get started, it'll get you to stop and think about things that you think you know and might or might not know. And so I thought I would do a warm up, but I see we only have a few people on the Zoom call. I will start with a little bit about, well, in fact, why don't we do this? I will tell you my why about this, and have you then share your why. What is it that one thing that I'd like to get from this is to have everybody on this in this hour think of one thing that they would do or could do differently to decrease the unconscious bias in their life. So I'm going to go kind of run through. And Jasmine, do you have a why? What are you hoping to get from this hour?
I think exactly what you just said. I could alter my decision making when it comes to seeing things that are right in front of me.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Jill, how about you?
Yeah. More awareness of how to counter unconscious bias in everyday life. I am aware that I need to, sort of check myself, and I feel like I do that. But again, just the ability to develop and hone that skill to check myself inside my brain.
Good. That's a very worthy goal. Thank you. Cheryl, would you care to share?
I think just being present for the clients that we serve here at the YW, because they're so very different, and sometimes thoughts just pop in your head and you're like judgy. So I want to stop that.
Good. And Adam, what about you?
I want to make sure that I'm addressing bias, not just thinking about race and gender, but also be very mindful of sexuality, thinking about First Nations, Indigenous people, ableism, and other forms of oppression.
Yes, great, excellent. Well, thank you. Well, what we're going to talk about, we'll get started here, a little bit about me, so that if you're curious. I am Dr. Murph, and Lucia Murphy, but my clients call me Dr. Murph. And I will tell you that this ain't my first rodeo. I've been doing leadership design for about 18 years. Before that, I was in sales, which talk about implicit bias and being judgy. after between those two gigs, if you will, I was in marketing, so consumer packaged goods, and I was on the team that developed Cool Ranch Doritos. So you have all kinds of things. We're going to talk about halo effects and those kinds of things that people like me counted on to sell their product. So um, I do leadership design, which has to do with individuals, but it also has to do with um, teams. I work a lot with teams. I am part of the social justice team. I was certified this time last year. Well, no, when was it, Adam? It was in July. Um, so it's something that I is near and dear to my heart, and so it's my pleasure to be here today. One of the things that I've found in as I've worked with leaders is that leaders are the best leaders are the ones who are curious, and it makes me very happy to hear that you all are curious about your own biases, how to identify them, how to catch yourself. That means that you are a great leader or developing into a great leader, because there's always going to be something out there that's not expected. And so what we want to talk about, again, implicit bias, unconscious bias. What is it? Where do we get it? What does it mean about our decisions? And what can we do about it? A couple of things I will tell you about today, and although we have a small group in the Zoom room, I will encourage everybody to please participate because you each have something to add to this conversation. The rest of us, we are going to be actively listening, we're respectfully listening, and we're going to be honoring confidentiality. What this means is people may decide to share things about themselves on this call, which is wonderful. And it's okay to share stories, but not who said what. And then finally, we are going to participate fully. And again, this is a little different than I was expecting. The whole Facebook thing is just different. So if you are on the Zoom call, I'm going to invite you to open up your chat, and we're going to talk about a couple of things. So help us stay engaged, help us participate, help us learn a little bit about each other. So is there anything else that's you all were thinking about, would like to have added to that? No? Anyone? Ferris Bueller? Okay. All right, let's get back to it then. All right, so things were moving along, and all of a sudden, the country woke up, and it was a real awakening. It was compounded by the pandemic. In fact, I would say the pandemic laid everything bare. It's very clear that social and racial injustice and all kinds of imbalances have been going on for a long time. And we talk about racial discrimination, but part of what the challenge is that oftentimes it doesn't just have to be race, but the things that we have come to believe may or may not be true anymore. In fact, I would say probably the biggest barrier to working in this successfully in this new world is having been successful in the previous version of the world. And the reason is because we have new barriers, new walls, new things that are getting in the way that weren't there before. And if you are a leader who is curious, then you are going to want to know where those limits are and how to either get around them or through them or over them. So let's talk a little bit first about bias. Bias is an automatic thought. It's an automatic expectation, an automatic outlook. It can be judgy. It's something that just it happens quickly. It happens not necessarily in the thinking part of the brain, but automatically. And what that means is when we talk about implicit bias or unconscious bias, that is the kind of bias you don't even know you have. So sometimes we know our biases because we think about them, but the automatic biases are harder to get our hands around because we don't even know that they're there. And so let's just talk about an example. All right, in the chat, tell me, what do you see here? Tell me the word good. Do you see anything else? And I'm gonna share my screen again. Do you see anything else? What do you see? Go ahead and say it, Cheryl. What did you see? All of a sudden, your face lighted up. Tell me.
Yeah, I at first when I saw it, I just saw good, but then I looked at the white and I saw evil.
Good and evil. They're both there. And what happens, what you did automatically was to go like you've been trained to go, right? The black spaces, the text. But both of those things are there. Good and evil are both there. It's just that we're not trained to see it. So let's talk a little bit about that. And if you are not seeing it yet, I'm going to get off here. Anybody not see both good and evil? Dinosaur tracks. Good one, Jasmine. Thank you. Hearts. I see a heart. Yes. What else? Anybody not see more than one word in here? Did everybody saw that? Bless you. So both of those things are there. Now, what's interesting is we can see the word good and automatically believe that that's enough. And we'll quit looking for the other things because you have an answer. And we've been taught, we've been educated that there is a single right answer. If there's a best way to do something, we're looking for an answer. So once we find it, we quit looking for more. And yet, in that example, both good and evil are here. Both of them are here. So let's talk about what that could. So as you're thinking about it, what could be an implication for having something existing that you didn't know was there? So give you an example. If I told you that I was, okay, there we go. So what are the implications of having things out there existing in real life that you don't see? What are your thoughts about this? And we've got the folks on the call. Feel free to just unmute. What are some thoughts that you might have?
I think we won't even know when we are causing harm.
Yes, that's really good. Yeah. We're not going to be looking for it, right? So, yes, exactly. What are some of your other thoughts?
That you might make decisions based on what you first see, not a multi-story.
Yes. We used to say in marketing that perceptions are fact, and that's true, but perceptions are not truth. And there is more to any picture than what we are able to look at and understand and think about. So that's a good point. Any other thoughts?
I was going to say lack of creativity, a limited perspective eliminates other options. Or new
Yes.
options.
Yes. Eliminate going with the first automatic response will keep unless you're aware of it, will keep you looking for something else. And there's almost always going to be something else. There's probably always going to be another perspective, another opportunity, another thing that's out there. Okay? Thank you. I have this video, and I'm going to just narrate it for you. Okay? And so, because my sound is a little bit squirrely today, so we're gonna start with a little bit of a test. Okay? And I am going to make sure that you can see this. There. Can you all see the screen now? Here's a test.
This is an awareness
It's an
test.
awareness test.
How many passes
How many
does the team in
passes
white
does the
make?
team in white make? Are you ready? Go. What was your answer? How many passes did it make? Did the team in white make? 13? Oh, the sound works now. Great. So you don't have to listen to my voice. Thank you. Thanks, Adam. 13? Any other? 12? Okay. All right. Well, there's one little opportunity here.
The answer is 13.
13,
But did you see the moonwalking bear?
now look over here on the right-hand side. Did you see the moonwalking bear the first time around? Yes? No? No. It's really hard unless you get, yes, unless you get in the habit of looking for something else, you're not going to see it. And that's when I talk about the issue in this new world is that our brains will fill in what is not all there and then ignore things that are there that don't seem interesting. So for example, if you've ever bought a car or been in the market for a car and you're about to make a purchase, do you notice anything interesting about when you're driving down the street, anything interesting about all the cars that you're driving by? Well, it's probably going to be the make, model, and even perhaps the color that you're looking to purchase. Now, is it that those marketers are just so smart that they put them out on the road just as you're making a decision so you know that it's a good choice? Not likely. What happens is our brains are selective. We fill in the blank. So here's an example. Here's another example of the opposite side of this, which is our brains filling in stuff that may or may not be there. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and have you read out loud to yourself, if you will, and I'll join you. If you can read this paragraph, it's because our minds are very good at putting together pieces of information in the way that's easy for us to make sense of. Our minds do this automatically without our conscious control. What are your thoughts? Yes, Jill, thank you. Did you were you able to read the paragraph?
Yes.
Yeah? Any trouble? No, because our brains will flip it so that it makes sense. So we need to be really aware. And to say it differently, it's part of the human condition. In other words, biases are nothing new. It just is part of the human condition. One of the things that we do know, for example, however, that biases will lead to suboptimal decision making. If you're a leader, and this book is, uh, 7 or 8 years old, by Chip and Dan Heath. Decisive. It talks about half a dozen other kinds of biases that are out there. And it's an older book. You can get it from the library. But it talks about why this is so difficult for leaders. Because when you are looking at something, there is something probably hidden in right under your nose that you haven't paid attention to because it wasn't something you were looking for. So let's go ahead and talk about a couple of biases, and then we'll jump into the what do you do about it? Okay. So there are probably 170 biases that have been identified, and not all of them have to do with what you and I do every day automatically, but it's something to be aware of. And I want to talk about just very briefly about 3 of them. Here we go. Lots of them. So we're going to talk just momentarily confirmation bias. And this is a big one, especially for racial justice. Confirmation bias says that we will see things that fit our expectation, and we will not see things that don't. Okay, so it's one of the ways that conspiracy theory websites have gotten so popular. You don't need a lot of evidence if you've already decided there's a grand conspiracy. To give you an example, I have a client who had a tough time growing up. And when he would go into a meeting, he'd go to a board meeting and somebody would say something not very nice to him. And he would automatically assume that it was because this other person hated him. It never occurred to him that maybe they had chili for lunch, or just didn't feel well, or didn't get a lot of sleep the night before. So, but every time something negative happened, it confirmed to him that he was unlovable and unloved. Yeah, it's kind of sad. Another one of the biases, and we'll talk about this in a racial sense, is in-group favoritism and out-group homogeneity. In other words, I will tend, and I being a human being, I will tend to like and be attracted to people who look like me or remind me of myself, which is, by the way, one of the reasons why it's important to get people of different backgrounds into schools and classrooms, because it's important that young people see a variety of role models. The opposite, the out of group, is that when I look in the mirror, I see Dr. Murph. If I look out at another group of folks out there, they all look the same to me. I will tend to say, well, my situation is an individual thing. Their situation is because, I'm going to generalize, their situation is because they're all bad, or they're all something else. They're all lazy or whatever. Um, now, are you all seeing the slides? No? Okay. Let me get this back up here. I have to show you my last picture because it was one that I was so proud of. There we go. Now can you see the slides? Yes? Okay. Just world hypothesis or halo effect. A halo effect says that if I get a spokesperson to show you a product and you like the spokesperson, you're going to assume that that product has the same positive characteristics as that person I'm putting in front of you. Just world hypothesis says something like, if they really wanted to get better, they would just go out and do things differently. Not taking into account the real life situation that a lot of folks have. Unclean air, unhealthy water, those kinds of things that keep someone from being able to take advantage of other things, right? So Just World says, well, if I can do it, anybody can do it. If I could, everybody gets what they deserve. We are going to just keep, if something bad happens to you, it's probably because you deserved it. If you got cancer, that's because you had unhealthy living. If you didn't get the promotion, it's because you were lazy, not because somebody might have had a bias that kept you back. So those are just a couple of them. Let me ask you at this point, do you have any questions about this so far? What are your thoughts? And you really don't want me to go through 170 of these. I'm guessing. What are your thoughts? Any thoughts?
Which one do you think is, of all those, one that's like super prevalent, but people just don't recognize?
Confirmation bias. Didn't even have to think about it. Confirmation bias says that if I expect you, because you look a certain way, or you dress a certain way, or are a particular gender or gender identity, then I'm going to interpret everything that you do or say through the lens of that expectation. The other one, and it's not one of the ones that I covered, but I see it a lot, and that is, and I call it the complexity bias. And that is, I am more willing to accept, to believe, I don't even have to believe it. I will accept a simple lie before I will accept a complicated truth. So tell me something that I want to hear. Give me a silver bullet and I'll buy it. Even if I know it's not true, I'm more willing to buy that than something that's going to make me push out of my comfort zone. Which explains a lot of the things that we're seeing in the United States today, in my opinion. So I think we see that a lot. So those two, great question, Adam. Thank you. Let me talk a little bit about the source. So where did these things come from? Well, we could go into, it's a function of what I expect, what I'm predisposed, my experiences, the things that I know. All of those things change what they call the schema, or the way the structure of my thinking, and it becomes almost a routine, a self-fulfilling. I do believe in the sort of the self-fulfilling prophecy. So what happens is we get a lot of these things from our childhood shoulds, and it sounds a lot like, well, people like us, we don't do those things, or I would never do that. Why would anyone so and so? Why does everybody? People don't believe, everybody does. And these are the kind of the stories that we've been told since childhood that are just Not that they're not true, but they're not the whole picture. Can you think of some of these? And the reason I want to take you out here, you're going to need a pencil and a piece of paper. So I want you to try an exercise for me, and we'll just do this for about 5 or 6 minutes. And what I want to do is talk about what's known as a circle of influence. So depending on who tells you these things, how willing I am to buy into it. So the center, there are people out there that I have some control, who have control over me, and I have some control over them, not in a slavish way, but just whose opinion I trust and who I might change my behavior based on their opinion. There are those people who influence my thinking. They're one step removed. There are those people that I'm curious what they're maybe concerned or curious. It's the people in your Instagram feed. You know, what are they doing? And then there are people that I'm just kind of interested in. So the closer we get to the inside of the circle, the more likely that person's opinions will and have rubbed off on us. So what I'm going to ask you to do is make a table, and it can be something like this, where you're going to just have numbered a couple of columns numbered from 1 to 10, or 1 to we don't have to do 10 of them. I'd like for you to take and make a list of 1 to 10, and leave space to the right of them to write some information. I am also going to drop this into the chat. I have this graphic in the chat. I will drop it in, but you can just use the one that you're writing. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. First off, is everybody good? You've got a little table in front of you? Okay. Great. Okay, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about, from 1 to 10, who are the people in your life today that most influence you? Start writing. 1 to 10. If you can only think of 6, just write 6. Take about 30 seconds and write that down. And I am not going to be collecting this, and you don't have to share, but I invite you to think about, who are the people that most influence you. Make a list. Let's take about another 5 seconds. Now, to the left of that, I want you to think about who they are. Okay, so and pick a couple. Okay, so what is their gender identity? What is the social class? What is their race? And maybe take a look at race, age, education, how you met. Pick a couple of these, and I want you to just go down and make a note to yourself. Who are these people who have the greatest influence on you? We're going to take about a minute, and I will let you. So, gender, class or social status, race, maybe religion, religious affiliation, age, education, and circumstance means how did you meet? Just take a couple of minutes and do that. those of you on Facebook, you can still be writing on your thoughts. And if you run out of time, this is an activity you can come back to later. So it might give you some insights that you weren't necessarily prepared to think about. Take about another 40 seconds. So what did you notice? And I invite you to unmute yourself and tell me, what did you notice? Did anything strike you? Feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like. Oh, Adam, lots of dead people. Okay. My circle is very much like me. Yes. And that's very human. What else did anybody notice? Mostly all female, with the exception of my father. Oh, that's very nice. Interesting. Okay. Would anybody else care to share? The truth of the matter is, by the way, thank you for sharing. The truth of the matter is that our biases are both nature and nurture. We come to some of it from our education. We come to some of it from our the people around us. And the more the people around us look like us, the more likely it is that it becomes part of our identity. What are your thoughts about that? Any thoughts at all? You've got a few outliers, yes. And if you are interested in doing the whole exercise, let me know, and I'll send you the whole list so that you can print it out and do the entire activity. But here's what happens. We start looking at people that look like us. So, for example, if you're in a hiring situation, you get a resume and you think, oh, well, that's nice. That person attended the same institutions that I did, or are part of a same network that I belong to. Maybe they've gotten some achievements that I respect, or ideas that are important. And what happens is we read some of this, like the fill in the blank that we did. We fill in the blank and say, oh, that person is probably exactly what I need, without realizing that there probably is somebody out there that is better, but you jumped to a conclusion. So the implications are huge, especially because more diverse teams tend to be more engaged, more innovative, more productive, and more profitable. And by the way, just in general, happier. So let's talk about what we do about this. All right. I do wish that there was some way that I could hear you all better, but okay, addressing. You all have personal action plans and commitments. I would be happy to send you this document if you'd like, and I'll send it to Jasmine, who can make it available to you. But I want you to, on that piece of paper that you were writing on before, at least jot down one idea, okay? And we're going to have four or five different steps. So we're going to talk about awareness, commitment, learning and development, taking action, and monitoring. So that's the framework that I'm going to use. And I'm going to stop after a few slides so you guys can have a chance to absorb it and ask questions. So how do you rethink? Well, one of the things about old biases is that we think that they're in the past, but things like racism are not in the past. It's here and now. It's something that we tend to prefer people that look like us, and so we need to be something we need to be aware of. And the idea that it's not my fault, when the reality is we're all sort of part of that whole situation. So one of the things that you can do to rethink and decouple, if you will, is find counter-typical exemplars. So if you have an image of a leader or a successful team member is a certain shape, size, color, whatever, actively go introduce yourself and make friends with people that aren't that. Get used to thinking about the possibility that there are people out there that are probably as good as what you expect or better. They're just not the first person that you go looking for, if you will. What are your thoughts? Yes, and Renee, thank you. We all live in little bubbles, and pandemic has made it worse. Now it's safe to be in our bubble, and yet we're more likely to be excluding really, really important other information. And by the way, in terms of part of decoupling and finding an alternative view is the idea of expose yourself to different kinds of music and different kinds of art, things that you don't know that might be interesting. Be curious. Being curious is huge. What are your thoughts about this, the awareness piece? Anything? And obviously, we could talk about this for 16 hours. My original presentation, you can't really see it, but it's like 185 slides. So I'm not doing this for you, not making you stand here for all this time. But let's talk about making commitments. There's a great article in Harvard Business Review, and it talked about some kinds of, what are some things that you are interested in participate? If you're really interested in making a difference for racial justice and for people that feel different than you, then take a step. Try an unrestricted employment application. Like, take off some of the boxes that we tend to automatically put on an application. If we're not, this was created before, but if you're in Georgia, have January 5th be a day off and let people participate in democracy. Give people some flexibility. So making commitments is really important. And what that is for you will depend. So let's talk about this idea of learning and development. So instead of just saying, I'm sorry that you're uncomfortable or you're in pain, learn empathy. And empathy is actually feeling somebody else's pain. It's not comfortable. But that's the point. And there are lots of great folks out there that write about this. So Brene Brown comes to mind as somebody who does a lot of work with empathy. Another option, another sort of learning opportunity is to decouple automatic. So things like predetermined job criteria or standardized tests. Why are they on there? If you're making a hiring decision, why does it have to be that somebody has a college degree? I mean, seriously. And I'm working with a client right now to do that. Instead of saying you need 4-year college bachelor's degree, we're saying you need to show a demonstrated ability to do whatever the skill is. So we're taking the automatic, it's always been there, we've always said this, pulling it out and going, what's another way that somebody could demonstrate that? Standardized tests, I've never been a fan of that. What we know from the stories that come out from the field is that a manager in a variety of different industries will apply the standardized test to people she doesn't know, but then hires their friends without the standardized test. So it's a barrier for no particular reason. Let's talk about a couple of other ideas, and then I'm going to come back to that. We now discuss our mission. Yes, exactly. So Cheryl said that we discussed our mission in an interview. Absolutely. Ask for a definition. The thing about the why, the mission of the why is to eliminate racism and empower women. If you can't define racism, some definition of racism, you probably don't belong there. Just saying. Just saying. Thank you. Thank you for that. One of the most important things you can do, to be honest with you, is to listen. And listen to what's actually being said, not listening to respond, but actually listening to what somebody is saying, listening to their voice. One of the things in a completely different presentation, when we talk about the difference between diversity and inclusion, you can hire a great number of people that represent other groups than the standard employee demographic profile of an employee that you have. But if you don't listen to their voice, if you don't give them an opportunity to be engaged, they're not going to stay. So, so instead of saying, ask a new question. And by the way, these are from that book, Decisive. So, if you catch yourself saying any of these things, get a different question. So instead of saying, do I want to do this or do that? Well, what if one of these options disappears? Then what? Or what if both of those options disappear? I know this is right. Well, where would I go look for disconfirming information? You're going to have to think about it. That's a great exercise. I can't decide about this or this. What would you tell your best friend? It's interesting how often, if I ask somebody this question, automatically they know what the answer would be. They just, for some reason, don't think to apply it to themselves because it's not their automatic behavior. And I love this. It's always been done this way, right? Well, if you were replaced tomorrow, what would your successor do? Now, there's a thought for you. If you were gone tomorrow, what would the next individual do? Any thoughts about this? Any thoughts?
excuse me, I think it's really interesting the need to pump the brake to make yourself think differently. And I think back to when I was a preschool teacher and people said, this little fella did it. He always did it. He wasn't even there that day, but people were like, he always gets in trouble, so he did it. So I think the need in education to pump the brake, and other social services will do us well.
Yes, and thank you, Cheryl. And to really to build on that, I'm going to encourage you. One of the now I do get resistance about this, but if you're asking me something that you would want to put on a job description, what you really want is somebody who's curious. And the reason for that is they're going to come in and ask about why do we do it this way? Or what if we change one thing? What happens? When you get somebody who's curious, you start asking different questions. And that's really important. So let's talk about a couple of other things really quick. One of the important things is to get started. And if you take a look at this particular website, and I can send, the link is at the bottom of the page. I can send you, I highly recommend that. The beauty about anti-racism and all the work that we do is you don't have to be perfect. You just have to get started. So that very important distinction. Another thing is really look at the old ways of doing things. And this particular article, they talked about a very large financial services firm literally got rid of their job application. And what they found was that right away they were hiring a diverse group of candidates, just simply because it forced everybody to be paying attention to the actual conversation and to not automatically put people into buckets. Get involved. If you haven't donated yet, this would be a great day to donate to the YWCA on Extraordinary Give. I hope you will seriously consider, and I know a lot of people, it's a hard time, but any amount that you feel comfortable giving would be greatly appreciated. And get help. And what I mean by that is, if you find that you can't, it's really hard to break out, get somebody else's perspective. It's really, really hard to read the label of the jar that you're in. And yet, the ability to change is one of the great sources of intelligence, or a great demonstration of intelligence. So what are you going to see when you take off these lenses? What are you going to notice? I'm wondering if you all have heard at least one thing that you'd like to try. Anything? Share one idea, if you will.
I think trying to stop the confirmation bias. There's, I've worked with staff before who are like, why the parent's not going to work today? Why are they bringing their child to childcare? It's not because they don't love their child. It's because they're going to the doctor, they're running errands, all the things, and the child is better off with us. But that split second, the staff members judging.
Yes.
So I think just trying to stop that initial thought will be helpful.
And ask questions. That makes me curious that you would say that. Why? Why would you say that? The more we can turn to asking questions, the better. And Adam also adds looking at a different variety of news sources. I could give you some interesting, and I didn't present it today, but looking at textbooks that exist in Texas versus California. I would be happy if you want to send me a note. I'd be happy to show you the crazy different interpretations of history, depending on where you live. So yeah, there's bias to. We need to automatically assume that there's bias to everything because we are all human. Any other thoughts? Anything else that you might want to try? Yes, thank you. I personally like the idea of finding different people to hang out with, to be exposed to different ideas and different art. And we started this with the pandemic in my family, and it's just been a wild ride. It's been awesome, really a lot of fun. So to not run over, let me go ahead and wrap it up. So implicit bias, we talked about what it is, where it comes from, briefly talked about the implications, but what we can do about it. Remember that your brain is going to trick you. It's going to fill in blanks that may or may not be true. And the magic happens outside of your comfort zone. So get started. You can wait a little bit, but don't wait too long. And any final thoughts, comments, questions? You guys are a very quiet group. Thank you. Thank you very much. Kwame, if you need, if you'd like to get more conversation around this or would like to get the handouts, just let me know.
I want to say thank you. This is something that now that we're talking about it, I'm going to keep at the forefront of every interaction that I have. And then I know that there are a couple people on Facebook that were tuned in the whole time that said thank you for this presentation as well.
Thank you. Thanks for allowing me to come and play in your sandbox today. Do seriously think hard and see if you can make a small or a large donation to the YW. Today's a great day to do that. So thank you so much. Make today awesome, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you. And the extra give link is in the chat box for those of you who don't have it yet.